I want to bring in now Democratic strategist, pollster, and MSNBC political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Republican strategist and former communications director of the Republican National Committee, Doug Heye. Welcome to you both. We just heard some of the sound, right, that Steve played for us. I don't think it's necessarily surprising to hear that, especially the one individual man who said it's all a scam. I think we expect that from about 30% of the electorate who will undoubtedly vote for Donald Trump no matter what happens. Cornell, though, talk to me first about the swing voter, right? The voters that have tired of the former president's drama, what he's bringing to the table, 3 indictments in, who knows what else is in the pipeline, right? But haven't yet committed to voting in favor of President Biden. How does the Democratic Party capture that voter?
Well, thanks for the question. Well, it's a couple of ways. One is, you know, Americans don't get excited about just good, clean, ethical government. I mean, it doesn't just sell itself. However, they will always choose it, right? It's like the paper towels. Like, you don't get excited about buying them, but you're always going to buy them because you need them. And I think that's what the case is right now. I think the contrast here grows clearer and clearer every day. You know, do you want good, clean, straight ahead, ethical government, or do you want to plunge the country into chaos and corruption? And more division. I think, broadly speaking, that is the contrast here, because in the end, it is going to be a contrast. And when you look at get inside the polling data and look at where independent voters are, they're not crazy about either of the parties. But Donald Trump has considerably higher favorables and intensely higher favorables than Biden right now. But Biden must make his case and make the contrast. And I think it's a pretty sharp contrast between good government, taking care of the issues, or personal vendetta, corruption, and more division.
Doug, he has higher favorables, but folks are also doubling down on him amidst all of these indictments. I want to read for you some of the polling that we're getting in here at NBC as well from June, finding that when asked whether those troubles were sufficient cause for GOP primary voters to back another candidate for the presidential nomination or to rally around Trump, again, this was from June, Republican voters responded 64 to 31 in favor of rallying around the former president of the United States. What does that say to you?
Well, it says 2 things. One, obviously, as we know, Donald Trump has a firm grip, by and large, on the Republican Party, but that doesn't represent the entire party. It also tells me that what we see is a lot of the candidates who are, in theory, running against Donald Trump, in practice, aren't running against Donald Trump. We saw a lot of statements that came out yesterday that essentially echoed Donald Trump's comments that he made yesterday about the indictments and, you know, things like shams and so forth. And Cornell would agree with me that typically in a campaign for president, Senate, mayor, House, governor, whatever it may be, if your opponent in a primary is indicted, you typically use that against them, to put it very mildly. And so to see the people who are running against Donald Trump right now not use that, and in fact buttressing him, is pretty unheard of.
Well, I got to say, it is atypical of the Republican Party in general. Right, because if the shoe were on the other foot, right, you think back to the Karl Rove days, right, as he was seen as a political mastermind of sorts, right? So if the shoe were on the other foot, and this was a former Democratic president of the United States who had been indicted 3 times, possibly one more in the pipeline as well, you know Republicans would be going in hard on this. They are handing this thing on a silver platter to the Democratic Party, and also to other folks that are running against the former president of the United States in this primary race. And yet it seems as if no one has been able to legitimately capitalize on this moment, Cornell.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because at the same time, you don't want to get in the way of your opponent when they're destroying themselves. And by the way, I want to double down and underline what Doug just said there. It is, I don't take DeSantis or Scott as serious candidates now. Because they are, in fact, taking on Trump's talking points, and they're never going to get in front of Trump with a 30-point lead if they just keep supporting him. They're never going to get in front of him. So I don't take them as serious candidates. But to your point, it is Democrats have a tough task here, because rule number one is if your opponent is destroying themselves and going up in flames, you stay out of the way of that. And I think largely from the president and his campaign, you've seen them pull back and stay out of the way. And also, by the way, he's still president, so he can't say too much about what the Justice Department is doing, right, because of his position as president. But look, you know, independent voters, swing voters see what's happening. And I don't think there's anything the president or the vice president should say or get involved in this process, while in fact the justice system is working to hold him accountable. In the end, I do think that they have, and I think even Doug will agree with this. I think the contrast here is pretty clear, as we've seen in a lot of presidential elections. Is, do you want to put someone in the White House who's been 78 felony charges, and talked about overthrowing the government, and by the way, he's talked about doing even more, put back in there? Or do you just want ethical, boring government that's gonna work for you and stay out of the way? I think it's a pretty strong contrast.